Hello and welcome to this week's recording of Relentless podcast. I have a phenomenal guest today, a serial entrepreneur, investor, CEO with just a ton of experience and wisdom and knowledge. And I'm just very excited to have him on this show today. Mr. Miller, welcome to this show.
Thank you, Vincent. Nice to see you. I'm
Good to see you.
I'm non-PGA. You see, there's no PGA next to my name. You're PGA. It's kind of a humble brag in a way, but it's nice to see you.
I'll switch positions with you anytime. How's your golf game?
You know, it's getting better. It's a little bit hard to play in winter conditions in Texas where there's literally no grass. You're hitting off of hard pan. But I'm working on it. I joined an indoor driving range, so I go over there like this morning. It's 7 a.m. my time, and I was there from about 5 until 6:30. Just hitting balls. And it turns out that doing more reps helps improve your golf
Helps
game.
a little bit.
Yep.
Very good. How's your wonderful wife, Michelle? How's she doing?
Michelle is wonderful and beautiful and really a nice companion.
I think she takes all the credit for feeding you right. I see you look great. You're in great shape.
Thank you.
Because I fed you in shimmer last time. Mr. Miller, I want to chat because I started this show not long ago, but I'm fortunate to know people like yourself, people that have been successful at business, but also people that are wonderful human beings. And I think that, on the few conversations I've had with you, I've just learned so much. And I think that you being available on this show will help so many people. And I think it's part of what you do. I know you're very active in San Antonio. So I want to get a lot from you, but I want to start off just by kind of you sharing a little bit about yourself, and then we'll go from there. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Let's see. Born and raised here in San Antonio, Texas. I'm one of 4 kids. So I have an older sister, older brother, and a little sister. And my dad is a physician. He's 86 and one of my favorite people on earth, which I'm fortunate to be able to say that about my father. My mom, funny story, when I was a competitive tennis player growing up, not as competitive as your wife, but in my own way, I played high school tennis, and we had these director's chairs made. And on the back of my dad's chair, we had it embroidered and it said coach. And on the back of my mom's chair, we had it embroidered and it said critic. So my dad was, you can do it. And my mom was, you can do it better.
You can do better. That's good.
Exactly.
Very good. So you grew up, and I think that from the last time I heard you speak, one of the things I picked up from you is that you got into business very early. So why don't you take me back to that? I want to get your kind of educational background, but I know you got started with business very early, knocking on people's doors. Tell me a little bit about.
Yeah, when I was young, I was just in the front yard, and the man who mowed our lawn, Sergeant Eaton, he had this green Chevy van at the time where he kept all his lawnmowers. And one day he was outside and he said a cuss word. And as a little kid, I was like, whoa, you're not allowed to say that. And and he said, it's these damn pecans. We had all these pecan trees in the front yard. And I just asked him, I said, well, what's wrong with the pecans? And he said, they ruin my blades. And then I got to go pay to have the blades taken off and sharpened. And he's like, they're just a pain in my, what? And I said, well, I could pick up the pecans so that they don't ruin your blades. And he said, okay. And I said, well, how much would you pay me? And he said, $2 a bag. And I said, okay. So I went inside and I got grocery bags and I started picking pecans. And before you knew it, I had 3 bags of pecans picked up, and he paid me $6. And that was really the beginning. And I started going to all of my neighbors' houses who had pecan trees and offering them the same thing. I'd pick up a bag of pecans for $2. And then shortly thereafter, we went to the store, and then I saw these shelled pecans, and they were selling for $4 a pound, which right now they go for about $15 a pound or something like that.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa. So I bought, with the money I had made, a Texas Inertia nutcracker, which I still have to this day. And, you put the pecan in, and then you pull it back with a rubber band, and then you can take the shell off. And I shelled all of our family's pecans. I got really good at it. And then I went back to those same neighbors and started shelling their pecans. And anyway, that's kind of how it started. And once I had those relationships in place, I sold them car washes, and then I started waxing their cars. And it really was the beginning of understanding that if you treat customers right, and you always do what you say, they will allow you to come back to them over and over with more and more things that they want and need.
Was this a strange thing in your family, like from your dad? Do you think you picked up some of that entrepreneurial drive from your parents?
Yeah, my grandfather, who I'm named for. In fact, I'm very excited about this. When I'm named for my grandfather, his name was Morris Abrams, and he
Uh-huh.
invented the machine that copies keys.
Ah,
So when I was growing up, my mom used to talk about it. So this is literally the watch that I'm wearing. I don't know if you can see it here. There,
yes, yes.
that is my grandfather's watch. God, it's a little bit
Wow.
blurry,
Yeah.
and this was given to him by his employees. Try to get the light
Yes.
right.
Yeah.
I'll
There
turn
we
it over
go.
the other way. Yeah. So anyway, it's inscribed for all of his years at service for the company that he started. But you'll see it's
Yeah.
Morris Abrams with in recognition 25 years for
25.
Curtis Industries. So anyway, so he wore this watch for many years. I never met him, which is why I was named after him because he had already passed away. But it's just
Yeah.
one of those things that I like wearing it because it kind of connects me to my past. So when I was growing up,
Yeah.
my mom used to talk to me about businesses and treating people right and solving problems and innovating all the time. So I think
Hmm.
that happened. And then my dad was a doctor, but anytime he had free time, he would invest in real estate and he would
Yes.
take me with him to look at apartments and we would bring turkeys and hams to our tenants every holiday. And it was just it was a great way to grow up. Some people don't realize how lucky they are. I do.
Yes. That's amazing. I don't think I've ever seen or heard anybody that goes that far above and beyond for their customers. So you were literally bringing turkeys to your tenants.
Yep. Yep. I mean, I
You
would do
didn't
that. And
lose any
to
time.
this day, during, I think in Thanksgiving, we give all of our employees turkeys. And then for Christmas time, we give them all spiralized honey baked hams. So it's honey baked
Wow.
turkeys and honey baked hams. It's just kind of a throwback to what my dad did. I had a very
Phenomenal
old
tradition.
uncle. I had an old uncle named Uncle Irving,
Huh?
and my youngest son is Isaac, who's named after Irving. And
Yeah.
and even though Uncle Irving could barely see, he saved all his money and he bought some apartments over many, many years. And he did the same thing. He would bring all of his tenants gift things to eat at the holidays, and they stayed with him for many, many, many years. And he took care of them, and
That's
they took care of him.
amazing.
Yeah,
Wow. So then you went and trained as a lawyer. And then did you practice before you really got into business full time?
I did. I
Tell me about
practiced
that.
for about 3 years. I joined. It was one of the oldest law firms, if not the oldest law firm in Texas, called Matthews and Branscombe.
Uh-huh.
Mr. Branscombe was he was one of the sort of leaders at the Internal Revenue Service. So anyway, I joined that law firm. I worked with companies and I liked it, but during law school, I'd had this idea. There was an article about Steve Jobs where
Hmm.
he said that he could put a read-write CD-ROM inside of a computer and you'd be able to put a library's worth of information on a disk. And I'm not a very good writer, but I had gotten the highest grade in legal writing in my class, or at least one of them. And the reason was because I was really good at digital research. So I
Hmm.
would go on to Lexis or Westlaw. Now those services cost about $250 to $350 an hour. And once I heard and read about what Steve Jobs was doing, I was like, wow, we could take all of that information that lawyers use, we could publish it
Yeah.
on a CD-ROM disk, and then all of a sudden we would have a great business and save them a lot of money. And that's what we did. And that company was purchased by basically Thomson Reuters, which is a big news company out of Canada, about
Hmm.
3.5 years after we started it. And that's really, that was the idea. So when I was at the law firm, I told the partners, my senior partner was a guy named Tullis Wells. And I told
Yes.
Tullis, and he goes, that's a great idea. Why are you practicing law? Why don't you go do that? And I was like,
Wow.
well, I have the job with you. And he's like, we'll keep, you do good legal work. We'll keep you until you get that company started. And
And that was
they
the
enabled,
beginning.
yeah, they enabled me to do it. And again, I'm appreciative to this day. And interestingly, his only comment to me was, we're going to help you get it started, but we want to be your lawyers. And I said,
Right.
okay, that's a deal.
That's a good
And
fair deal.
my lawyer to this day was my lawyer at that law firm more than 30 years ago.
Wow. That's amazing. So I know there's been so many other investments you've done since then, and you've been involved in some really, really big investments and been a very, just a wonderful investor and partner and supporter of the San Antonio community. But I think one of your biggest investments was obviously Rackspace, which ended up you sold. And I just read about Rackspace now. It's got annual revenues in excess of $2 billion. Tell me about that specific journey of Rackspace and the decision to finally sell it.
So I think the most interesting part of the Rackspace story is that originally, early in the days of the internet, I had bought a router called an Ascend Pipeline 50. And at that time, a typical dial-up modem was 64K. So an Ascend Pipeline 50 would bond two 64K lines. You'd have 128 kilobits, and that was considered really fast for internet. And I would have people, friends of mine, business people, come over to the office, and I'm like, hey, this is the future. This is what the internet is. And we were
Right,
using Archie and web crawler and all these things. So I decided, all of the big office buildings around the country are going to need to have high-speed internet installed. Nobody had it. And
right.
I want to be the person to bring that to them. So I started interviewing companies that could help me do that across the country. And I talked to a local person that used to be with Southwestern Bell. He used to climb telephone poles, very knowledgeable about networking. And he said, I don't know how to do that, but I work with a group of young kids. They just graduated college. Even though they're young, don't underestimate their abilities. And I said, okay. And
Yeah.
I met with the kids and they had a solution for me. The leader of that group was named Richard Yu, who I just spent a week with at Consumer Electronics Show in January. So we're still great friends to this day. But most of the bids had come in at about $250,000 to $1 million, which was really pretty expensive to light up an office building. Hard to get a payback on that investment. Richard came
Yeah.
in and he said, I think we can do it for about $25,000. And I said,
Wow.
whoa. I said, that's a completely different proposal. And he said, yep, we can do it. And I said, okay, I'm going to need technical people to do this around the country. Would you want to give me a 20% discount and get 20% of the equity?
Equity, right?
And he said, I think we're going to pass. And I said, why would
You
you
say
pass?
no to the equity?
Yeah. And I said, why would you pass? And he says, I think we have a better idea. And I said, well, what's that? And he says, I'm not going to tell you. And I said, well, how about this? You're going to have to sell somebody on your idea. So why don't you sell me on your idea? And he
Yes.
thought about it for a minute. He said, okay, I'll sell you on. So the name of his company at that time was called Scimitar, which it's a Japanese sword. And so I said to him, and he told me the idea of putting servers on racks and that literally companies were going to need hundreds and hundreds of internet servers. And I said, okay, that may be a much better business than what we were contemplating. And he said, yeah. And I said, have you ever sold one? And he said, nope. I said, well, why don't you go prove to me that you can sell a server? I said, in fact, why don't you
Yes.
sell 10? And if you can sell 10, I'll take the winnings from the legal publishing company and I'll roll it into this endeavor. And
Yes.
he said, okay. And so about 3 weeks later, he came back and they didn't sell 10, but they had sold 8. And I said, well, 8, why not 10? And he
That's yeah.
said, we don't have any more money.
That's all
And
they
I'm
had.
like, right. And I said, okay. I said, well, you've done really well. And I said, we will have this documented and we will be in business within 3 weeks. And we did. And then we
Wow.
all grew it together. And it was a lot of fun. And we're all still friends.
Wow. So that was the story of now eventually ended up being Rackspace. And so I did speak. How many people were employed at Rackspace and what was the revenue with that?
So the day we invested, they had 8 servers online, $500 per server. So they were doing $4,000 a month, $50,000, $48,000 a year. As we grew it, everybody thinks these companies become huge overnight, and that's not the case. So, the first month we sold 10 servers, and then the next month we sold 12, and then 20, and then 25, and 30. So it was a very slow incremental growth, but really solid. And we were insistent on delivering this incredible customer service so that people would keep coming back to us. I said the name of the company originally was Scimitar. And I was like,
Yes.
Richard, you got to come up with a new name for the company.
Right.
I can think of like 20 different ways to spell Scimitar, Cymitar, Scimitar, YR. It's like, who knows? And he's like, really? And to his credit, when he came back, he said, what do you think about the name Rackspace? And I said, that's great. I really like it. And so we started growing, and before you knew it, we had, $100,000 a month in revenue by the end of year one. We had about $400,000 a month in revenue by the end of year two. We were close to about $1 million a month in revenue by three. So it was just this nice, steady
Roger.
progression. And when you're growing 50 to 70% a year, you really have to be careful about your systems and your people and your
Yes.
processes, and just making sure that you're kind of delivering your customer
Yes.
promise every day.
Yes. Wow. And so how long did you run a Rackspace before you finally moved on from there?
So I exited just before the company went public, just because I had an offer that
Yeah.
made sense. And
Yes.
the company went public in late 2008, and then it sold a few years later to
Wow.
a private equity firm. So
Wow. So that's amazing. So now, so how did you, what I'm trying to pick out is like, obviously you have a very visionary mind where you were able to see something that basically was nothing and you were able to project and see how it could grow. But also I think it goes back to your pecan story is that you knew that you could bring in a lot of understanding for the customer experience and all of those things. How did that help you in terms of understanding, like seeing an idea from infancy and seeing the potential growth of what it could be? Where do you think you get that from?
I think whenever you're looking at these businesses, you want to look at the size of the market and think about
Hmm.
how many people need that solution and what is their alternative to getting it from you.
Yes.
And can you change their buying patterns?
Yes.
Can you insert yourself in a way where they would go, you know what, this is a lot better than doing it any other way?
Yes.
There's a lot of people that have great ideas. I'll frequently meet with entrepreneurs, and we'll look at it, and they're going after a market. I'll give you a good example. Somebody came to me a few weeks ago with a solution for air traffic controllers.
Uh-huh.
Brilliant guy, absolutely
Yeah.
brilliant, and understands air traffic control because he's been an air traffic controller. As we discussed it, there's only 14,000 air traffic controllers in the United States. Well,
Wow.
you know, if you get 10%, that's 1,400. If you get 1%, that's 140. And I always assume I'm going to get about 1% of my market. And if I've gotten
Right.
1% of my market, I've done really, really well.
Yes.
And therefore, it better be a big market. So the bigger the market is, if you get 1%, you look great.
The numbers, right.
Right. So in that case, I just said to him, I said, look, I think that the market is very small. Not that it's not good, it's just small, and you have to judge it accordingly. And you definitely should not raise venture capital, because with that small of a market, you'll never get a return on your investment.
Right. Right. Wow. So you get a lot of these things, but obviously I think one of the biggest things that you're doing now is Zenex. So over the years, you've done so many other different things. Tell me now about Zenex, because I think when I heard the story about Zenex and just the transformation in the hospital industry and the hospitality general industry, it's phenomenal. Tell me a little bit more about that.
So Zenex is a company that was founded by two Johns Hopkins PhD epidemiologists. And
Hmm.
they had a vision where they said they wanted to stop the pathogens that are in the hospital that cause people to get infections and die. And in the United
Yes.
States, 100,000 people die a year, and 2 million people get these life-threatening infections that are incredibly painful, debilitating, and have lasting negative effects on their lives. So
Yeah.
very compelling vision.
Yes.
What they realized is that most hospitals are still cleaned with chemistry. They use
Uh-huh.
bleach, they use ammonia, they use hydrogen peroxide. These things have been around for 40 years, and you
Yes.
still have a huge number of infections.
Uh-huh.
So if you think about the United States, there's about 1 million hospital beds. If 2 million people are getting these infections, and what I would say is 2 million people are reporting the infections. So it's
Right.
probably
Right.
a higher number than that.
Yes.
100,000 deaths occur that are reported, but that number is also much higher. So, you or I, maybe we suffer a injury playing golf because we trip and fall, and we need
Hmm.
to have our leg worked on. And all of a sudden you go in for a simple operation, you pick up a pathogen like MRSA, and
Yes.
you're in a life-threatening situation. And people don't really realize that by the very name of these pathogens, it's indicative that they have become resistant. So a good example is staph. people say, oh, you
Right.
got a staph infection. Usually they're talking about methicillin resistant Staphylococcus aureus,
Right.
MRSA. Well, in the very name, methicillin, that was the antibiotic that could solve all problems. Doesn't work
Wow.
anymore.
I didn't know that.
How about
Yeah.
vancomycin resistant enterococci? Vancomycin was another antibiotic. So the world created all of these wonderful antibiotics. And because they were overused, they're
Become
no
resistant.
longer effective. These pathogens are resistant to them. And drug companies aren't making new antibiotics because they're out of date within approximately a couple years. So it's really what needs to happen is you need to prevent the infection. So
Yeah.
going back to their story, they said, well, usually people disinfect rooms with UV light made by mercury lamps. They wanted to use a xenon lamp. And if you've ever
Yeah.
driven a performance car, it'll have xenon headlights. It turns out xenon is 4,000 times more intense than a mercury
Yeah.
bulb, which makes
Yes.
it much faster. It makes it more efficacious. And so,
Yes.
as we sit here today, about 1,250 hospitals around the world have our robots. Literally yesterday, I saw some numbers from a public hospital that
Hmm.
uses the robots in about 98% of their discharge rooms. One of the terrible infections that affects people is called Clostridiosis difficile, C. diff. And when you looked at the numbers, the CDC would have expected, or Center for Medicare and Medicaid would have expected them to have over 300 infections, and they
Yes.
had approximately 60. So it was
Wow.
81% lower. And their MRSA infections, MRSA, the staph infections, were about 65% ish lower. I mean, these
Wow.
are incredible
Right. Yes.
life-changing numbers. And so it's been my mission to get as many hospitals to adopt this technology as possible around the world. We have you're in Japan. We have a wonderful partner in Japan called Terumo. Terumo just bought 2 more robots last week, and
Uh-huh.
they've been deploying them across many countries in Asia. And it's FDA authorized because it
Yes.
works.
Is this by far your most I want to say, is this by far your most treasured investment, especially with the life-saving component to the job the robots are doing in the hospitals?
Yeah, it is. I mean, we keep outside my door, there's a television that tracks how many cycles have run. So these robots have been used 40, I think as of yesterday, it was 42,300,000 times. And we can look, just like I reported on that Texas hospital a moment ago,
Yeah.
over since really they began being deployed in 2011 or 12, they've prevented about 800,000 people from getting infections and saved over 75,000 lives. And that's
Wow.
something that's worth. Rackspace was a lot of fun,
Yes.
but this is really important. When you think about, in the United
Yes.
States, everybody's critical of the Department of Governmental Efficiency, and I'm looking at it and saying, hey, Doge, if you want to prevent Medicare, Medicaid from spending between 20 and 40 billion dollars a year, if you would insist that hospitals deploy these robots, the
Yes.
same thing that happened with that Texas hospital would happen nationwide, and all of a sudden the savings would flow.
Right. So you think it's a no-brainer that this should be mandated, really, that every hospital should have these robots. What's the robot's capacity? Like one hospital, one robot per hospital, or how does that work?
No. Usually a robot can cover about 40 beds, and that will also allow it to be used at nighttime for the operating rooms.
Yeah.
A Ochsner is a good example. Ochsner had 800 beds. They ended up having 16 robots, and they had dramatic effect on the pathogens, which resulted in patients not getting infections. It was
Yes.
amazing.
Wow. That's amazing. So what's the potential then? So obviously there's so much. Is there a lot of competition for the robots? And what's your projection for where it's going to be like in the next few years?
Worldwide, the demand for these robots, eventually, it's like if you can jump forward, kind of like what we could see the internet would be, eventually there will be about 1 million robots around the world that are doing this kind of pathogen reduction, disinfection work, and it will just be a different world. And people will look back and they'll be like, wow, I can't believe we didn't do it like this. Sort of like
Yeah.
people would say today, like, wow, I can't believe that you don't wash your hands after handling meats
Right.
and poultry and other things to prevent yourself from getting diseases. It
Yes.
is that clear. It is that straightforward. And it's the same level of certainty that I have, that I had with the internet. It
Yes.
just takes time. It's a little bit
Wow.
annoying because, if people didn't adopt the internet, well, then they just didn't get to experience the joy of the information and
Yes.
interaction that they could have otherwise had. In this case, it's costing people lives. And I find that to be
Yes.
very painful. I find that to be
Wow.
personally very painful.
Yes. Is there investment potential? Is this publicly traded, the Zenex?
Nope. It's a private company. Yeah.
The company. Any hopes of it going public? Sounds like a no-brainer.
I think eventually it could. It's like that. That's not really, you focus on going public when you want to raise money or
Yes.
when shareholders are looking for liquidity. And that's
Mhm.
really not what we're doing right now. We're really
Yeah.
focused on growing the customer base, getting more
Yes.
hospitals, and quite frankly, just preventing the infections and saving lives. That's what gets us up every single morning.
That's amazing. So I can't imagine how your brain works, just very heavily involved in businesses and having that special eye to get opportunity and to see it. How do you balance your life from work, like your work life balance? What's that like for you? I know though, but I know because I know. Tell me about your routine, your bed routine, and what time you get up.
I mean, I got like this morning, I was up at about 3:30, and
3:30 every day.
not every day. I mean, sometimes I get lucky and I'll sleep until 6:30, and I'm like, it's like a miracle, it's miraculous.
Yes.
But usually at around 3:30, I wake up and I've got like 10 ideas that I just need to go write down or execute on and get started with the day. So I do that, and then recently, since I joined the indoor driving range at around 4:30 or 5, I'll go over there. I'll try to hit balls for an hour, hour and a half, even 2 hours. Come back, exercise, shower, get into the office, and then work as long as I can. I'm finding as I've gotten older, it turns out at around 3 or 3:30, I'm starting to sort of my productivity is declining
Yeah.
more than it used to. So I allow myself to either take a nap or just say, you know what, that's a 12-hour day, and I'm okay going home and taking a breath.
So that's amazing. So now, when you look at the world today, and with your work ethics and how you've been able to achieve success, it's obviously because of your tireless work ethic. What does it make you think when you look up at today's generation of, first of all, people trying to get successful very quick, just like that, and people not wanting to do the work? Tell me about what that makes you think as somebody that understands this balance thing very well.
I think I think it's a shame for the people that think that, because you have a lot of bright young people who, if they would just be a little more patient and if they would work hard and exercise their intellect, their God-given gifts, they would experience the kind of success that they want to experience, just not necessarily at the time that they want to experience it.
Yes.
But that
Yes.
said, I think, even today you have a mix. You have some people who want to get rich quick, which has always been
Yes.
the case, and you have other
Hmm.
people who are willing to put in the work. I wish that I could hit a golf ball 320 yards like you, and I can't.
Right.
And even at my age, I'm 58. I realize, like, I just got to keep going in and working on it one day at a time, and
Hmm.
eventually I will get better
Yes.
and be able to do it. So I think, I have three kids of my own, and they're all working really hard, and they're
Yes.
dedicated to each of their own crafts, which are all very different. And it's a pleasure to watch them each pursue their own thing. And they have
Yeah.
friends that get to see their friends who are working just as hard as they are. So I think it's a mistake that there are a lot of young people who expect it right away, but not everybody.
Yes. 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 So if you look back to your life, what would you have told your younger self? But I think a lot of credit has to go to your dad and your mother, that they created the foundation for you to thrive, really. And I think that's been very important for you. And I've shared my story with you, my relationship with my dad. I think my dad,
I read your book. Yeah.
yes, his impact on my life was phenomenal. And but in the absence of that, what would you have told your younger self? And I think that what I'm trying to drive at here is that I think that what you understand very well is patience and the time it takes to grow anything. You could have the most brilliant idea, but even with that, it's not going to happen just like that. What would you tell your younger self, or what would you tell your son if he came to you that he was pounding at an idea and it's not coming through?
Well, my dad always had a saying that he would say to us. He'd say, the harder you work, the luckier you get. The harder you work, the luckier you get. And
Yes.
I think that that's the correct advice. The other thing, I mean, if you want to start companies, the best piece of advice I got was I was talking to the gentleman who bought the legal publishing company about leadership. And I said, well, what do you think is the key to managing people? And he looked at
Yes.
me and he said, you don't manage people. And I said, really? He said, you lead people, you manage things. And I
Mm.
said, okay, I don't really know what that means. He said, you manage inventory, you manage
Yes.
your budget, you manage your real estate, you manage your presentations. He said, with people, he said, you lead them, you give them a vision, you explain to them why you're trying to achieve it, how you want to achieve it, and then you let them do their work. He says, and they will
Yes.
impress you every time. And I think those are the two keys, to the extent that there are any keys,
Yes.
to success.
Yes, that's very good. You say that. Funny, I was reading somewhere in a book I was reading recently, and in there was a quote that was talking about how sometimes in companies people get fired and all of these things that happen. But it went back to talking about how people don't fail because they don't want to do it. They fail because they don't know how to do it. And I think it goes back to the visionaries, that communication lapses. People, if you can communicate the vision directly, people buy into it and you show them how to execute. People are very wired to be independently successful, and they can kind of add to the vision. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I have never met anybody who doesn't want to succeed.
Right.
That's just like a human. Not only do they want to succeed, but they want to be recognized for their excellence. So
Yes.
give them the opportunity to do what they naturally want to do. Don't get in their way,
Yes.
and they'll impress themselves and they'll impress you.
Tell me about some of the most successful stories as far as you being able to be there for people. Say, for instance, seeing potential in somebody, hiring somebody, and watching them grow to become successful by their own. And what do you think are some of the things you saw in people like that?
Well, I mean, I think I've, instead of focusing on me, I've just seen, I have a HR person right now, and Rebecca, she's incredible in terms of identifying talent, really knowing emotionally how they feel and thinking about their feelings,
Yes.
and then making sure that the job descriptions are clear, that what's expected of them is clear, and even tuning other people in, like me, if I'm missing it, because I might miss it sometimes, saying, hey,
Yeah.
Morris, you need to pay attention to this.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate the insertion. So, it's things like that. When COVID hit and we needed to go from producing dozens of robots a month to hundreds of robots a month, my leader, Roger Mack, he came in and organized his teams. And all of a sudden, the manufacturing area had tape on the floor. We had specific assembly lines. And he worked with the engineering team, Juan, who runs the engineering team. And I mean, it just was a fine-tuned machine to get these things out. I couldn't have done that, but these
Yes.
gentlemen and ladies, they managed to hire the talent and get those robots produced so that we could prevent the spread of COVID in the hospitals. And an interesting COVID was that we identified COVID late in 2019, early in 2020, and we instantly asked a local infectious disease institution if they could test our robot against it. So we were the first company in the world to be able to announce actual results for reducing COVID.
Of it.
Yeah. Yeah. We were able to
Is that the
eliminate COVID in less
conversation
than
you
1
had
minute.
on MSNBC?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Was that the interview you had on national TV? Because I think I saw
Yeah,
something like
there
that.
was one. Yeah, there was one. Yeah, I think it was on Cavuto is where we
Yes.
announced it. Yeah. Yeah. He was
That's
nice enough.
amazing. So with that, I want you to tell me, I know you very heavily invested your own personal resources, but also you've supported so many organizations within San Antonio and beyond, which I know is a very important part of your life. Tell me about some of your involvement to support programs within your community and things like that. What are some of your exciting things that you're involved with?
There's a charity in San Antonio called Haven for Hope.
Hmm.
This is a place where homeless people can go, and periodically we'll go on Sundays and work and move cans, prepare sandwiches, and then literally you end up serving the homeless individuals. And they're always very
Yes.
polite in return. I think that that's an important charity. And then there's, whether it's working with, my daughter does a lot of work with SNPSA, the dog rescue.
Yes.
There's just lots of local charities that are in need, and
Yes.
they need economic support, but they also need people's time to think about them
Yes.
or to help them strategize what should they do next.
Hmm. Yes. And you're probably not gonna like this. You don't want me to say it, but I'll say it. I think that one thing that I didn't get a chance to tell you this, but one thing that I especially admired about you was we've played golf before and I've seen you and you've showed up at, you don't keep a country club membership. You've gone to these public golf courses and you show up, you're the first person there. And, with the level of success that you've achieved, you could easily walk into any golf club in America or anywhere in the world, but you've chosen to kind of lead a very disciplined, humble life, almost to a fault. Like for me, growing up how I grew up, and you're thinking like, if I have all this success and business is doing well, I want to be found in some of the most exclusive places. But that's not you. You've been very, very deliberate to be around where you find the common people. Tell me about that. Why that, and where do you get that motivation to stay present with the community and with the common person around your activities?
I think it's more that I don't think if you want to let success change how you think, you can. But, I'm still the same person that I was when I started all this, and I'm still just as hungry as I was
Yes.
when I started it. So look, we go on nice vacations and we do play at very nice golf courses. And I like joining my friends and family at these places, just like everywhere else. But, I'm still the same person. I was laughing the other day. I was shopping for something. This is an item that is less than $15. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, it would be rational and a better use of time to just go online, Amazon or wherever else, find the product, buy it, and move on. I don't know why, but I'm sitting there and trying to say, well, can I get it for $14? Can I get it for $13? It's kind of ridiculous, but you're just wired the way you're wired.
Yes.
Similarly, in any business I'm involved in, I want to render this level of customer service.
Yes.
And as a customer, it's like if I go to a nice hotel, I'm very polite, but I'm a fairly demanding guest because
Yes.
I understand how I would deliver it on the other side. And
Yes.
and if you're
Yes.
paying a premium, I really expect them to do that. So
Yes.
it's a dual-edged sword, right?
Yeah, that's interesting. It's just, you don't see that a lot, people that are, because I think one of the biggest problems, especially in our society today, is that success changes people, changes a lot of things about you. But you've been very humble. And I think it's, again, another credit to maybe your foundational values from your parents and things like that. How are you making sure that you transfer that to your kids now? Because I'm sure, they've gone, but it's amazing. You mentioned your daughter is involved with the dog rescue, but how did you make sure that you raise your kids to appreciate things like that and to understand the value of hard work and to be grounded?
I don't think you can really there's nothing that you can say to the children to teach them. It's more a
Hmm.
matter of they observe how you interact. So if
That's
you're
good.
polite to the wait staff, if you're polite to the people at a hotel, if you're polite to the doorman, if you talk to people, they observe it and they absorb it and they want to replicate it. And
Yes.
similarly, if they saw a parent who was rude and disrespectful, they'll imitate that behavior as well. So I think it's more a matter of them observing it. And again, I was fortunate to have parents who their behavior was always just impeccable. They were
Yes.
polite and thoughtful. I did see them get aggravated when people took advantage of them, and I get
Yes.
aggravated when people try to do that. But in general, I think how you act is how your children will act, not how you
Yes.
say. So it's some people say, do as I say, not as I
Not-
do. And I think
Right.
it's the opposite. It's like, do as I do, they'll not listen to what you say.
Yes. Yes. That's a good point. I want to ask you, if you could write a book right now, what would you write? What would you write about? with all the knowledge and the information that you have, what would you write about?
Well, if I was going to write it right now, I would probably write a book about the FDA and how to interact with the FDA and what do you do if you don't think a government agency is doing exactly what they're supposed to do. So that's what I would write right now.
Yeah.
No, in general, I don't, I've sat down to write books periodically. And I think most of the lessons, there are some great books out there, How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Yes.
Sounds like a book on manipulation, but it's really a thoughtful book. My dad probably bought me 6 copies of it when I was growing up, and
Wow.
I bought myself copies. I've given that. That's a good thing to give to children.
Yes.
There's a book by Al Reese and Jack Trout called Positioning: The Battle for Your Mind. It's an old book, but it's something that I review periodically. They also wrote the 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing. There's a current marketing gentleman named Rory Sutherland, who wrote a book recently called Alchemy that I think is brilliant.
Alchemy, yes, I saw that. Yeah.
So I think, as opposed to thinking that I'm the font of all knowledge, perhaps I'm a distiller of great knowledge that's already out there.
Yes.
And then, of course, there's the Bible. The 10 Commandments are pretty good guide
Absolutely.
for how to live your life. Follow the 10 Commandments, you'll probably have a pretty good life.
Yes. I was going to ask about that. Tell me about your faith. That's important to you, I know.
Yep. I was born Jewish and I am Jewish. And, one of the things I like in the temple, it's, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. And just like the rule of leadership, it's kind of, that is the key to having a good life, is if you treat others, it's similar to the golden rule, do unto others as they would do unto you. But this is a step, beyond that. Love your neighbor as yourself. And it's like, if you treat people that way, it turns out life will be pretty good back to you. Not that it'll be perfect, and not that you won't have disappointments, and not that people won't let you down, but overall it's a positive, hopefully it's a positive experience. I'm not done with it. So
yes. So with that good balance, how do you handle stress, or how do you deal with challenges? Everybody goes through challenges of different kinds. How do you deal with that?
Well, first of all, they get me down.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't deny that. And if anybody says, well, nothing bothers me, I'd say, well, no, there's things that they bother me.
Yes.
I only have 2 or 3 grudges in my entire life that I hold.
Yes.
And I know exactly who they are and why. Other than that, I try to have friends and my wife who are easygoing and who are fun to talk to. And, you spend time with them and they will help snap you out of it. And generally, no matter what's going wrong, if you can try to get a good night's sleep and exercise, you'll feel better after.
That's good.
That's really the ultimate elixir, is get a good night. You're really upset, get a good night's sleep, exercise, and you'll feel better.
That's good. Simple, right? Nice and simple. Okay, we're going to get winding down here, but I want to hear from you. What's giving you the most excitement now? I know you're still as hungry as you've always been, and you're always going to continue exploring and seeing the next best thing. But what is the one thing that keeps you going, and the most exciting thing that you think is ahead of you?
So we own a company called golfballs.com. And because I love golf, I think that business is a lot of fun. Zenex, I think about preventing infections and saving lives every single day. It's really, if you talk about the thing that motivates me most, it's figuring out the healthcare puzzle, and figuring out adoption is what's really important. And then, just literally on a daily basis, how do you make the people around you's life a little bit better? This morning, I went out to dinner with somebody last night and they were telling me about their company, and there's some rebranding that could happen for their company. And when I woke up this morning, I had about 10 or 12 different thoughts on company names, and I spent an hour researching for them. They didn't ask me to. I'm not a consultant to them, but I send it to them. It's kind of fun. It keeps me creatively thinking. And, how many people can you help if you just allow yourself to? I think you're doing that through your podcast. You're asking great questions. The only thing you haven't done, and I'm very critical of you at this, you haven't taught me how to hit the ball 300 yards. But other than that, you're really making you're making the world a better place by trying to bring knowledge. So I think that, if everybody does that every day, the world will, be a better place.
Be a better world.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And so my final question for you is, I was going to ask you this at the beginning, but if you had an opportunity, would you ever consider getting into politics?
No.
Any specific reason for that?
I just it's just not how I'm wired.
Yeah.
I think, at least from what I observe, there's a lot of negativity.
Yes.
There's people are willing to say things that aren't necessarily true.
Hmm.
Um, and I'd rather, the daily thought I have is, as human beings being given all the gifts that we've been given, and we
Yes.
have compared to many, many people in the world, we have to leave the world better than we found it.
Hmm.
And I think I can do a better job of that through business or helping people or counseling or creative thought than I could ever do in politics. So it's just not a goal.
That's good. So you found your place and you've obviously thrived. I couldn't thank you enough, Mr. Miller. I mean, you've inspired me in so many ways more than you'd ever know. I observed you a lot when we played golf and how you made sure you counted every single shot. You played the same ball. Those are some of the very few things and I think, you love the game so much. Tell me, what do you think of golf? How would you relate the game of golf? Because so many people relate the game of golf to the game of life. How do you marry the two? What do you think about that comment?
Well, first of all, I think you're right. You're never, I've shot even par at a golf course. Well,
Yeah.
then your next goal is to say, well, can I do it every time? Can I do it
Yes.
again? Can I shoot under par? So you're really
Yes.
never done. And that's the most similar thing to life. It's like you can do really well in a business. Does that mean you're done? I mean, you could be, but
Right.
I don't live my life that way, and I don't play golf that way. And then the other thing in golf that's very similar is, golf is a self-policing sport. In other words, if you want
Yes.
to cheat, you can cheat and nobody really knows. And the only
Right.
person you're cheating is yourself,
Stuff. Yeah.
because you're misleading yourself into what you're truly capable of. And
Yes.
life is like that too. You can cheat, but you're kind of cheating yourself. You really want to be able to say, I did it and I did it the right way. And
Yes.
that's really, it's amazing how similar those things are.
Yes.
And that's why when I'm playing golf, they're, in San Antonio, especially during the winter, we have
Yes.
rock rules, we have root rules. It's like, I will not destroy my elbow. I will move my ball off of rocks. But other than that, you need to play the ball as it lies.
Yes.
If there's a local rule that says, there's mud on the ball and you can move it today and clean it, okay, then that's the rule. But that's the rule for everybody.
Right.
It's just it's a matter of, staying true to your own rules, because nobody's watching you more
Yes.
closely than you watch yourself.
Very good. Okay. So every interview that I have my guests tell me what they think of this word. Tell me what comes to your mind when you think of relentless, because I started relentless because in looking at my own life, in my own young life and the things that I'm trying to do, but the people especially that I admire, like yourself, are people that have achieved incredible things, stayed humble, and just displayed values that are admirable to the world. It was relentless. They've been very relentless on their journeys. It was never a straight line. Life was never just given to them. Things just didn't always go right, but they stayed with it and they figured things out, and eventually, they overcame. So, relentless. Tell me what you think about relentless.
First of all, I really like the word, and it's beyond effort, because you could have tremendous effort. Relentless is really the next step. It's that whatever you're doing, there will be obstacles that are put in your
Yes.
way, and you can't let those deter you. So it's not only forward motion, but it's forward motion. I hit a block. Okay, let's go to the right and let's get around it and let's keep moving no matter what
Yes.
happens. And,
Yes.
with Rackspace, we had an idea called fanatical support, and it
Uh-huh.
was above and beyond. And that's a very similar word, fanatical and relentless, because there is no limit to
Yes.
what you could do. Limitless is another great
Yes.
word. But relentless has you could be limitless and not do anything about it, right? Like, I have unlimited potential, but I haven't done
Yes.
anything. Relentless implies you're doing the actions and you're not letting anything stop you.
Stop you. Thank you. Mr. Miller, I really thank you so much for joining me today. I couldn't appreciate you enough. Thank you for joining me, and I'm going to catch up very soon.
All right, great to see you. Thanks, Benny.
Thank you.